cold wind whipped through the streets of the colony, carrying dust, scraps of paper, and the smell of cooked food that made her stomach twist in pain. Her steps were slow, weak, almost dragging. She had not eaten properly in days. The alien girl's skin glowed faintly under the dim streetlights, though the glow had dulled with hunger. Her silver eyes searched the ground, hoping to find even a crumb, but the path was empty. People passed by quickly, not even looking at her. Some glanced once, frowned, and pulled their coats tighter, as if her presence was a disease. She wrapped her thin arms around herself and moved on, her bare feet leaving faint marks on the wet stone. Rain began to fall, cold drops mixing with the dirt on her face. She tried to cover her head with her tattered cloak, but the fabric was too thin. It clung to her body, heavy and wet. She turned into a narrow alley and crouched near a broken wall. The sound of her stomach growling was louder than the falling rain. She pressed her hand to it, biting her lip to keep from crying. Crying never helped. Crying only made people laugh. Then, through the sound of rain, a smell reached her nose. Rich, warm, heavy with spices. Her eyes widened and her breath caught. She lifted her head and sniffed again. Food. Real food. Not the rotten scraps she sometimes found in trash bins. This was fresh. Meat roasted slowly, vegetables simmered, bread baking. Her heart began to pound, fast and hard. The smell wrapped around her, pulling her like invisible chains. She rose to her feet and followed it. Her legs trembled, weak from hunger, but the promise of food gave her strength. She stumbled across puddles, her wet cloak dragging, until she reached the back of a small building. Steam curled from a vent, carrying the smell of soup and bread. The building glowed faintly from the inside, and the sign at the front read Cook's Hearth. She did not know the human words, but she knew what it meant. Food lived here. She pressed her back against the wall, heart racing. Her mind argued with itself. If she went in, they might throw her out. Worse, they might call guards. Humans had never shown her kindness before. They saw her kind as beggars, thieves, unwanted outsiders. But her body screamed louder than her fear. She had to eat, or she would not last another night. Her eyes darted to the door at the back, slightly open, light spilling through the crack. She stepped closer, her breaths shallow. The warmth from inside touched her damp skin, making her shiver. She reached out, hesitated, pulled back, then slowly raised her trembling hand and knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Only the sound of rain and her own beating heart filled her ears. She almost turned to run when the door creaked open. A tall man in a stained apron stood there. His hair was dark, his face lined with age, his hands thick from years of work. The smell of food poured out stronger, wrapping around her like a blanket. She swayed on her feet, dizzy. The man looked at her, his brow furrowing. His eyes traveled over her soaked cloak, her thin arms, her glowing but hollow eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His gaze softened. He did not shout. He did not slam the door. He just stood there, watching her. She lowered her head, ashamed. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. She was too hungry, too tired. She only lifted her hand to her mouth, then her stomach, then looked at him with pleading eyes. The man said nothing. He stepped back, leaving the door wide open. She froze. Was this a trick? Was he letting her inside or waiting for guards? Her heart hammered against her ribs, but the smell was too strong, too warm, too close. She took one small step forward, then another. The light inside the kitchen was bright, making her blink. The air was heavy with heat, steam rising from pots and pans. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on bread cooling on the counter. She swallowed hard, mouth watering. The chef noticed. Without a word, he moved to the counter, picked up a bowl, and filled it with steaming soup. He placed it on the table in front of her, along with a piece of bread. Then he stepped back again, arms crossed, waiting. Her hands shook as she reached for the bowl. She lifted it to her lips and drank greedily. The warmth slid down her throat, filling her belly with fire. She had to stop and gasp for air, but she didn't care. She tore into the bread with her teeth, crumbs scattering. Tears filled her eyes as she chewed. She had not tasted food this good in her whole life. The chef watched her, saying nothing. His face stayed serious, but his eyes softened. For him, maybe it was just soup and bread. For her, it was life itself. She wiped her mouth with her sleeve and lowered the bowl, still breathing hard. She glanced at him, afraid he would now demand payment she didn't have. But he only asked one word, in a calm, low voice. Hungry? She nodded quickly, unable to hold back her tears this time. They rolled down her cheeks, mixing with the rain still clinging to her skin. She clutched the bread tightly, as if someone might take it away. The silence between them was heavy, filled with things unspoken. Outside, the rain beat harder against the walls, drowning the world. Inside, the warmth of the kitchen wrapped around her, strange and unfamiliar. She had stepped to the door expecting rejection, maybe even punishment. Instead, she found food, and a man who did not push her away. Would this kindness last, or was it only a moment before the world turned cold again? That question lingered in her mind as she took another trembling bite of bread, watching the human chef who had not turned her away. The soup was gone before she even realized how quickly she had drunk it. Steam still rose from the empty bowl as she wiped her mouth with the back of her trembling hand. The bread was only half left, but she held it close, almost afraid someone might snatch it away. Her chest rose and fell in quick breaths, like she had been running. Warmth spread through her belly, making her body feel alive again after so long. For the first time in many nights, the sharp pain of hunger was fading. The chef stood a few steps away, arms folded across his chest. He had not spoken more than a single word. He simply watched her. His eyes were not cruel, not mocking, but heavy with thought. She dared to glance up at him, bread still in her hand. His gaze met hers, and she quickly lowered her head again, ashamed. She was dirty, wet, her hair tangled, her cloak torn. Everything about her screamed of desperation. Why was he letting her eat? Why was he not shouting for her to leave? She chewed the bread more slowly now, each bite softening her heart. It tasted simple, just flour, salt, and heat, but to her it was more precious than treasure. Tears burned her eyes again, but she blinked hard, trying not to let them fall. She had learned long ago that tears made you look weak, and weakness was punished. Still, the bread blurred in her vision as water slipped down her cheeks. The chef's deep voice broke the silence. More? She froze. Her head lifted slowly. Had she heard right? More? She had expected the bowl to be snatched away, the door slammed in her face after one meal. But he stood there, waiting for her answer. She wanted to nod, wanted to beg for more, but pride battled with hunger inside her chest. She hesitated, clutching the bread as if it was her last lifeline. Finally, her lips moved. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper, cracked from dryness. The chef turned, filled another bowl, and placed it on the table again. This time, he also set down a small plate with roasted vegetables. The smell made her knees weak. She looked at him once more, then reached out with shaking hands and pulled the bowl close. She ate slower this time, but every spoonful sent warmth through her chest. She chewed the vegetables carefully, savoring the taste of oil and spice. The chef leaned against the counter, still watching. He seemed more curious than suspicious, as if trying to understand her. His kitchen was quiet except for the sound of her eating. The crackling of fire in the stove and the soft patter of rain outside filled the silence between them. When she finished, she sat back, breathing heavy but calmer now. She wiped her mouth again and whispered, "Thank you." Her words were awkward, her accent strange but honest. The chef didn't reply. Instead, he reached for a cloth and handed it to her. She took it carefully, unsure if it was really meant for her. She used it to wipe her wet face, removing the rain, dirt, and tears. Her reflection in the shiny metal pot beside her startled her. She looked less like a starving stray and more like a person again. But as the warmth filled her, fear returned. Nothing came without a price. No human had ever helped her before. Why now? Why him? She looked at the chef again, her voice shaky. Why? Give me food? The man studied her for a moment, then shrugged lightly. Hungry people should eat. His answer confused her. It was too simple. Her kind had begged before and been chased away. They had stolen and been punished harshly. Yet here, in this small kitchen, a human had chosen to feed her without demand. It felt like a trap she couldn't see. She lowered her eyes again, thinking of leaving before anything changed. She had food now, enough to keep her alive for a little while. If she stayed, she might lose more than she gained. Slowly, she stood, clutching the last piece of bread. She stepped toward the door, her bare feet quiet on the floor. But before she could leave, the chef's voice stopped her. Wait. Her body stiffened. She turned her head slightly, ready for harsh words. Instead, his tone was calm. Not safe outside tonight. Rain, cold, stay here. Warm yourself. Her heart pounded. Stay? In a human kitchen? The thought was unthinkable. Her people had always warned her, trust no human, or you will pay. But the room was warm, the food still lingered on her tongue, and her body ached from the cold outside. She looked at the door, then at the fire glowing inside the stove. Her chest tightened with conflict. The chef didn't push her. He simply went back to his work, chopping vegetables as though her choice did not matter to him. The steady sound of the knife hitting the board was strangely comforting. He was not threatening her, not chasing her. He had simply given her food and left her with a choice. She stepped back slowly, away from the door. Her legs gave out and she sat on a wooden stool near the warmth of the stove. Her cloak steamed as it dried and her trembling slowed. She watched the chef work, his movements strong and practiced. The smell of food filled the air again, softer now, almost soothing. Her eyes grew heavy, though fear kept her awake. She had lived her whole life waiting for betrayal. But tonight felt different, dangerous in another way. Not because of cruelty, but because of kindness. As she clutched the last piece of bread to her chest, she wondered if she had just stepped into the only place in the world where she might belong. Yet deep inside, another thought whispered like a shadow. Kindness never lasts. Would this man turn on her tomorrow, or was he truly different? That question followed her as her eyelids grew heavier. The warmth of the kitchen, wrapping her in a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. When her eyes opened again, the kitchen was quieter. The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind the soft dripping of water from the roof. The warmth from the stove still spread through the air, and she realized she must have drifted into a short, uneasy sleep. She sat up quickly, afraid she had overstayed her welcome. The last piece of bread was still clutched in her hand, hard and dry now. She glanced toward the counter and froze. The chef was watching her again. His arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Her heart skipped. She stood up at once, pulling her cloak tightly around her body. I go now, she whispered, her voice unsteady. She moved toward the door, ready to leave before his patience ended. She had eaten, warmed herself, and that was already more than she ever expected from a human. To ask for more would be foolish. But before she reached the door, his voice came, calm and steady. Stop. Her legs froze. Slowly, she turned. His gaze met hers, sharp but not cruel. He wiped his hands on his apron and stepped forward. For a moment, she expected him to demand payment she could never give. She braced herself for anger. Instead, he spoke words she did not understand at first. Work here. She blinked. What? He pointed to the counter, then to the pans, the tables, the cutting boards. You! Work here! Kitchen! Her mouth fell open slightly. She stared at him, unsure if she heard correctly. A job? He was offering her work? No one offered her kind work. Humans barely allowed her people to walk in their markets without trouble. She shook her head quickly. No, I cannot. The chef didn't move. His deep eyes studied her. Why not? She stepped back, clutching her cloak. I don't belong here. Humans, they don't want me here. If I stay, trouble will come. Her voice broke at the end. She remembered too many nights of shouting, stones thrown at her, being chased from corners where she tried to rest. The man's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. I decide who works here, not them. Her breath caught. The certainty in his voice was strong, like stone, yet she shook her head again. No human trusts us. We are thieves, beggars to you. I cannot. The chef stepped closer, his tone lower but firm. You worked tonight. You carried your body here even though you were weak. You ate, but you also stayed. That is something. Work here, and you will not be hungry again. Her chest squeezed tight. She looked around the kitchen, the glow of the stove, the wooden shelves stacked with jars, the sharp knives, the smell of bread still in the air. It was a different world, clean and steady, compared to the chaos outside. But her fear fought against the small flicker of hope inside her. What if they come? She asked, voice trembling. The people outside. They see me here. They will hate you. They will break this place. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The man finally answered, voice like iron. Let them try. My kitchen, my rules. Her lips parted, but no words came out. He turned away from her and walked back to the counter. He picked up a knife, chopped onions with quick movements, and spoke without looking at her. Choice is yours. Work here or leave. But if you leave, hunger will follow. Her heart raced. Leave? She thought of the streets outside, the cold alleys, the rain, the way her stomach burned empty. She thought of her people, scattered, unwanted, hiding in shadows. Leaving meant going back to that, back to nothing. But staying? That was dangerous in another way. If she worked here, she would be seen. Humans would not like it. She might bring trouble to the man who gave her food, and yet her hands shook as she gripped the dry bread tighter. She could not remember the last time someone had given her a choice instead of orders, threats, or rejection. Slowly, she moved toward the counter. The chef didn't stop chopping, but his eyes shifted toward her, watching carefully. She placed the bread down gently, then whispered, "What? What do I do?" He set the knife down, wiped his hands, and pointed to the pile of vegetables. "Wash. Cut. Like this." He showed her the motion, steady and simple. Then he handed her a smaller knife. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She had never held something so sharp in a human place. She felt every stare of the empty room pressing down on her. Slowly, awkwardly, she picked up a vegetable, dipped it in water, and copied his movement. The slice came out uneven, thick in some parts and thin in others. She bit her lip, embarrassed. The chef glanced at it, then back at her. He didn't scold. He simply said, "Again." She tried again, still uneven. Her shoulders sagged, but he nodded once. Better. Something warm stirred in her chest. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't shouting. He was teaching. Step by step, slice by slice, she followed his movements. Hours passed, the rhythm of chopping filling the room. Her fingers grew sore, but her fear softened little by little. At last, the chef set down his knife and began stirring a pot. "Enough for today," he said. "You learn. Tomorrow, more." Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind. Did that mean he truly wanted her to come back? She stared at him, confused, until he turned and gave her a steady look. "Work here. You will not starve." Her breath shook. She had come to this door ready to beg or steal, certain she would be cast away again. Now she stood in a warm kitchen with food in her belly, a knife in her hand, and something far more dangerous than hunger growing inside her. Hope. But as the thought took root, fear whispered again. Hope was fragile. Would it survive tomorrow? Would he truly keep his word? She didn't know. Yet for the first time in her life, she wanted to find out. Morning light touched the small windows of the kitchen, spilling soft gold across the wooden floor. The alien girl stood stiffly near the counter, clutching her cloak around her thin body. Her eyes darted everywhere, the shelves full of jars, the hanging pans, the fire glowing under the stove. She had never been inside a place like this, not as someone allowed to stay. Every sound seemed sharp in her ears, every smell almost overwhelming. The chef moved about calmly, tying his apron, washing his hands, preparing for the day as though nothing unusual had happened. He looked at her once, then pointed at the pile of vegetables waiting on the table. "Start." Her heart jumped. She nodded quickly, stepping forward. She picked up the small knife he had given her last night and tried to copy his motion again. But the blade slipped against the surface, cutting too deep, nearly slicing her own finger. She gasped and dropped the piece, staring at her trembling hands. She expected him to scold her, maybe even throw her out for being clumsy. Instead, the chef only said, "Hold steady. Slow. Watch me." He moved beside her, showing the correct grip, the steady rhythm of his hand. She copied, her movements shaky but more careful this time. The pieces still came out uneven, but she managed not to hurt herself. Sweat gathered on her forehead as she forced her body to follow the rhythm. He glanced at her work, gave a short nod, and went back to his own task without another word. That single nod made her chest feel lighter. She continued, clumsy but determined. Sometimes the vegetables flew off the board when her hand slipped. Once she dropped the knife and it clattered loudly to the floor. She bent quickly to pick it up, whispering an apology. The chef only replied, "Again." His voice was steady, not cruel. Her cheeks warmed. She worked harder, repeating the motion until her wrist ached. Slowly, she improved. The slices were not perfect, but at least they looked closer to what he had shown her. She looked at him, waiting for anger, but instead he placed a pot of water on the stove and dropped her uneven slices inside without complaint. The sound of boiling water filled the room, and she felt something strange. Her work had gone into food, real food, not wasted. She had never been part of such a thing. Later, he showed her how to stir a pot without spilling, how to measure salt with careful pinches, how to carry plates without dropping them. Each task felt like a mountain at first. Once, while carrying a tray, her arms shook and the bowls slid, one crashing to the floor. The loud smash made her flinch back, her whole body braced for punishment. But the chef only sighed, picked up the pieces, and handed her another tray. Try again. Hold tighter. Her throat ached with relief. She nodded quickly, gripping the tray so hard her knuckles turned white, and this time she did not drop it. As the day went on, her nervousness mixed with a small spark of pride. She was learning, little by little. Still, not everyone in the kitchen shared the chef's calm. Another worker, a human boy with sharp eyes, whispered loudly to a girl beside him. "Why is she here? Alien hands don't belong near food." The words stung. The alien girl kept her head down, focusing on her task. But the whisper felt louder than the crackling fire. The other girl laughed softly, hiding her mouth behind her hand. Their eyes burned into her back. Her hands trembled, almost dropping another plate. She wanted to run, to escape the stares, but the chef's voice cut through the tension. Work, not talk. The two workers froze and went back to their duties. The alien girl's heart pounded. He had not defended her directly, but his tone left no room for argument. The whispers stopped, though their glances did not. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. Hours passed, and the kitchen grew busier. Customers' voices rose outside, footsteps echoed on the wooden floors, and orders piled up. The chef moved faster now, his hands a blur as he chopped, stirred, and cooked. He barked short commands. "More plates! Stir that! Fire lower!" She rushed to keep up, sweat dripping down her neck, her cloak long abandoned on a chair. Her fingers fumbled, but she managed to follow his instructions. When the fire burned too high, she nearly panicked, but he guided her hand to lower it. When she forgot the salt, he reminded her firmly but without shouting. Step by step, she survived the rush of the day. By evening, the kitchen slowed again. The customers left, leaving silence broken only by the clatter of washing dishes. The alien girl sat on a stool, exhausted. Her hands were sore, her back ached, and her legs felt like stone. Yet inside, there was a strange warmth, different from hunger, different from fear. She had worked. She had been part of something. The chef set a small plate in front of her, fresh bread and stew. She stared at it, then at him, confusion in her eyes. "For me?" He gave a short nod. "Workers eat." Her lips parted, but no words came. She picked up the spoon and tasted. The stew was thick, rich, full of flavor. It was her own chopped vegetables that floated in the broth. Her chest tightened, and tears filled her eyes again. She ate slowly this time, not like a starving creature, but like someone who belonged at a table. She finished and whispered, "Thank you." The chef didn't reply, but he looked at her once, then gave the faintest nod before returning to clean his knives. As she sat there, full and warm, she realized something she had never believed possible. Maybe, just maybe, this kitchen could be more than a place to beg for food. It could be a place where she could stay, learn, and fight against the emptiness that had ruled her life for so long. But deep down, she knew the whispers were only the beginning. Not everyone would accept her. And sooner or later, trouble would come knocking at the kitchen door. That thought lingered in her heart, sharp and heavy, even as hope flickered brighter than before. The next day began like the others. The alien girl worked quietly, cutting, washing, and carrying. Her hands were getting steadier, her movements less clumsy. The chef gave her short instructions, and she followed them without question. Still, she could feel the stares of the other workers. They whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Some frowned openly, others muttered words she didn't understand, but the sharp tone told her enough. She kept her head low, focusing only on her tasks. Every mistake felt heavier when they watched her. Once, she dropped a spoon, and the boy laughed loudly, calling her clumsy. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't answer. The chef silenced him with just a look, yet the sting in her heart stayed. She wanted to prove she belonged, but fear weighed down every movement. By afternoon, the smell of roasted meat filled the kitchen, drifting out into the streets. People gathered outside, waiting for food. But mixed with their hunger was anger. Voices rose, not in excitement, but in complaint. "Why is she in there?" one man shouted. "Aliens don't belong in human kitchens." Another woman's voice followed, sharp and cold. "Throw her out, or we'll take our business elsewhere." The alien girl froze where she stood, a tray in her hands. The words pierced her like knives. Her breath quickened. She turned toward the door, panic rising in her chest. She knew this would happen. She had told herself humans would never accept her. And now, the truth stood outside, loud and clear. The chef stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. He pushed the door open and faced the crowd. His tall figure stood firm, his face hard as stone. "This is my kitchen," he said in a strong voice. "I decide who works here, not you." The crowd murmured, restless. The man at the front spat on the ground. "We won't eat food touched by alien hands. If she stays, we'll burn this place down." The alien girl's heart pounded in her chest. She gripped the tray tighter, trembling. Her throat closed as she whispered, "I should go." She turned to leave, but the chef's voice cut through the noise. "No." His tone was sharp, final. He stepped back inside, his eyes locking onto hers. "You stay." She stared at him, her lips parting in shock. "But they will hurt you. Because of me." He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he walked past her, grabbed the tray from her hands, and placed it on the counter. Then he looked at the other workers, his voice steady but fierce. "Anyone who cannot work with her can leave now." The kitchen fell silent. The boy who had mocked her earlier lowered his eyes, suddenly quiet. The girl beside him shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. None of them moved toward the door. The chef turned back to his pots, as though the matter was finished. But outside, the voices grew louder. A rock struck the window, cracking the glass. The alien girl jumped, her breath caught in her throat. She had seen this before, angry humans turning violent, mobs tearing apart whatever they hated. Her chest tightened as fear swallowed her. The chef's hand slammed down on the counter, silencing the noise inside. He stepped to the door again, glaring at the crowd. "You want to eat? You eat. You don't? Then leave. But this kitchen is mine. She stays." His words thundered with such force that even the angriest man stepped back for a moment. The alien girl's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever stood for her like this before, not even her own kind. She pressed her trembling hands to her chest, unsure if she was dreaming. But the crowd was not finished. "We'll see how long you last," someone shouted. "This place won't stand by morning." A roar of agreement followed, fists shaking in the air. Then, as suddenly as they had come, the mob scattered into the night, leaving behind broken glass and the taste of hatred in the air. Inside, the kitchen was quiet again. The alien girl stared at the chef, her voice small. "Why? Why do this for me?" He looked at her, his face still firm but softer now. "Because you deserve a chance. Same as anyone." Her throat ached. She lowered her head, unable to stop the tears that finally slipped free. She wiped them quickly, ashamed but her heart swelled with a warmth she had never known. That night, as the workers cleaned and closed the kitchen, the alien girl sat by the stove, her thoughts heavy. Fear still lingered. The crowd's threats echoed in her mind. She imagined flames, broken walls, angry faces. But stronger than the fear was something else, a fragile but growing belief that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where someone would fight for her. Still, she could not ignore the danger. She had brought trouble to the man who saved her. The shattered window was proof. She clenched her fists tightly. If anything happened to him because of her, she would never forgive herself. As the night deepened, shadows stretched across the kitchen walls. The alien girl lay on her thin blanket in the corner, staring at the flickering firelight. Her eyes refused to close. She listened to every creak of wood, every drip of water outside. The chef's words repeated in her head, "She stays." For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Not out of pity, not out of need, but because he believed she deserved a chance. That thought filled her with courage, but it also filled her with dread. Tomorrow would not be easy. The crowd would return. They would not stop until they broke her spirit or destroyed the place she now called shelter. Her hand rested over her heart as she whispered to herself, "I will not run." But deep down, she knew the real test had only just begun. Night fell heavy over the streets, the air thick with silence that felt dangerous. The alien girl could not sleep. She sat near the stove, her arms wrapped around her knees, listening to the faint sounds outside. Every gust of wind made her heart skip. Every shadow across the window looked like a figure waiting to strike. The chef had gone to rest in his small room, leaving her with the dying fire, but her eyes refused to close. She remembered the mob's angry faces, their threats echoing in her ears. This place won't stand by morning. Her stomach clenched with fear. She thought of slipping away, running before the trouble came. If she left, maybe the chef would be safe. But another thought cut deep into her heart. If she left, she would return to the same hunger, the same cold streets. And worse, she would betray the only person who had ever stood for her. She gritted her teeth. She would not run. The first crack came at midnight. A stone shattered against the door, followed by the sound of breaking glass. She leapt to her feet, her eyes wide. Shouts filled the street outside. Flames flickered, lighting the dark. The mob had returned, and this time they carried fire. The chef rushed out of his room, pulling on his apron. His eyes hardened when he saw the glow outside. He grabbed a bucket, filled it with water, and thrust it into her hands. "Quick, we fight the fire." Her legs trembled, but she nodded, gripping the heavy bucket. Together they rushed out the back door. Flames licked the wooden walls near the kitchen window. Smoke curled into the night sky. The crowd cheered, throwing more burning sticks. The girl's throat burned, but she lifted the bucket with all her strength and threw the water against the fire. Steam hissed, the flames shrinking, but more fire came from another side. She ran back inside, filled the bucket again, and staggered back out. Her arms ached, her chest burned, but she did not stop. The chef worked beside her, strong and steady. He carried larger buckets, his movements quick and sure. The mob shouted insults, throwing rocks that clattered on the ground near their feet. One stone struck her shoulder, and she cried out, nearly dropping the bucket. The chef turned sharply, fury blazing in his eyes. "Cowards!" he roared at the crowd. But there was no time to fight them. The fire grew hotter, the smoke thicker. The alien girl coughed, her vision blurring, but she kept moving. She stumbled, nearly falling, but forced herself up again. Her lungs screamed for air, her arms shook like breaking twigs, yet she lifted the water and dashed it against the flames. Over and over. Each time she thought she could not go on, she saw the chef's figure beside her, refusing to give up, and it gave her strength. At one point, she collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Her vision swam, black spots dancing in front of her eyes. She thought she might faint. But then she heard laughter from the mob, cruel and mocking. Look at her. The alien girl can't even stand. Her heart blazed hotter than the fire. She forced herself up, teeth clenched, rage mixing with determination. She would not let them win. She would not let this man's kindness burn to ash because of her. With a cry, she lifted the bucket again, staggering into the smoke. The fire hissed and cracked, but slowly, with every drop of water, it began to weaken. Neighbors who had been watching from their windows finally rushed out, carrying buckets of their own. Not everyone hated her. Some hated injustice more. Together, they joined the fight, and soon the mob's shouts turned to curses of frustration. One by one, the cowards melted back into the shadows, leaving only their smoke and broken threats behind. When the last flame died, the alien girl dropped the bucket and collapsed onto the ground. Her body shook violently, her hands raw and blistered from the heat of the water. She coughed hard, her chest heaving, but she was alive. The chef crouched beside her, placing a strong hand on her shoulder. His face, streaked with soot, softened as he looked at her. "You did well," he said quietly. Tears burned her eyes, but they were different this time. Not tears of hunger or shame, but of pride. She had stood her ground. She had fought beside him, not as a burden, but as someone who mattered. The kitchen was blackened, its walls scorched, the smell of smoke heavy in the air. But it still stood. The fire had not won. The mob had not won. And in her heart, she felt something new and fierce. She was no longer just a starving girl begging at doors. She had become part of this place. As dawn broke, painting the sky in pale gold, the alien girl sat on the steps outside, her hair tangled, her clothes stained, but her eyes bright with determination. The chef sat beside her in silence, the two of them breathing in the cool morning air. For the first time, she felt like she had earned her place. But deep down, she knew the danger was not over. The mob would not forget. More trouble would come. Still, she also knew one thing with certainty. She would not run again. Whatever came next, she would face it, because she was no longer alone. Smoke still clung to the air the next morning, the scent of burnt wood heavy in every breath. The alien girl stood in the kitchen, staring at the blackened walls. Her hands were sore, her arms weak, but her heart felt strong. She had faced fire, anger, and hatred, and she was still standing. The chef moved quietly beside her, already repairing what he could. His face was calm, his movements steady, as if the night's chaos had not shaken him at all. She bent to pick up a charred piece of wood and placed it in the bucket. Her body screamed for rest, but she worked silently, wanting to help. The chef noticed and gave a small nod, approval shining in his tired eyes. She felt pride grow inside her, a warmth she had never known before. As the day passed, whispers spread through the town. People talked of the fire, of the mob that had tried to destroy the kitchen, and of the strange sight of an alien girl fighting the flames beside a human chef. Some mocked, saying it was foolish. Others, however, were curious, and a few, surprisingly, spoke with respect. By evening, the local council came, their long coats brushing against the floor as they entered the half-burned kitchen. The alien girl froze, her chest tightened, fear rushing back. Councils meant rules, and rules for her kind usually meant chains or exile. She lowered her head, expecting harsh words. But the leader of the council, an older man with sharp eyes, looked around at the damage and then at her. "You saved this place from burning?" he asked. Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but no sound came. She only nodded slowly, her hands twisting together. The council leader's gaze lingered on her. Then he turned to the chef. "Why keep her here? Her presence causes unrest. You could have turned her away." The chef's reply was simple, firm. "Because she works harder than anyone, because she deserves a chance." The room grew quiet. The alien girl dared to lift her eyes, her heart pounding. The council members exchanged glances. Finally, the leader sighed. "Very well. If she has earned her place, then so be it. From this day forward, aliens may work freely within this town." The words struck her like lightning. Her breath caught, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had lived so long believing her kind would always be unwanted, that no human law would ever allow them dignity. And yet here, because she had stood her ground in the fire, everything was changing. When the council left, the alien girl turned to the chef, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Because of you, because of this place, everything is different now." He looked at her, his face unreadable for a moment, then softened. "Not because of me, because of you. You fought, you stayed, you proved them wrong." Her chest swelled, the weight of those words sinking deep into her heart. She had not only saved herself, but had opened doors for others like her. The thought filled her with pride and a fierce sense of belonging. That evening, customers returned. At first, only a few entered cautiously, as if testing the air. But soon more followed. They looked at the alien girl, some with doubt, some with curiosity. She stood tall, her hands steady as she carried trays, poured drinks, and served bread. No longer did she hide her glowing eyes or shrink under their gaze. She walked with quiet strength. The whispers still came, but they were different now. Some were filled with wonder, even admiration. Children stared at her with wide eyes, tugging at their parents' sleeves. One little boy whispered loudly, "She's the one who fought the fire." The alien girl's heart skipped, and for the first time, she smiled. Later that night, after the last customer left and the kitchen grew quiet, the chef sat at the table, wiping his brow. The alien girl approached slowly, her steps soft. She placed a bowl of stew in front of him, the same stew he had taught her to make from her own chopped vegetables. He looked at it, then at her, and for once, a faint smile tugged at his lips. "You've learned," he said simply. She nodded, her voice steady. "I will keep learning. I will never waste what you gave me." He ate in silence, and she sat across from him, holding her own bowl. For a moment, the fire's glow danced between them, warm and calm. She felt as if the world outside no longer pressed so heavily on her shoulders. Here, in this kitchen, she was not a beggar, not a burden, not an outcast. She was a worker, a partner, and maybe even family. As the night deepened, she stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her face. The stars stretched across the sky, brighter than she had ever noticed before. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the air fill her lungs. For the first time, her future did not feel empty. She remembered the night she had knocked on this very door. Rain pouring, hunger tearing her apart. She had expected rejection, maybe even cruelty. Instead, she had found food, fire, work, and a man who refused to let her be cast aside. Now, as she stood under the stars, she whispered to herself, "I will not be hungry again. I will not be alone again." And deep inside, she knew it was true. The girl who had once been desperate and hopeless had been reborn in the flames of that kitchen. Tomorrow would bring new struggles, new whispers, and new tests, but she was ready because she had found more than food. She had found a home.